All right. My name is Rich Schmidt. I'm here with Cliff Allen at his home in Clackamas. It's March 12th, 2020. Thank you so much for joining us today, Cliff. Really appreciate this.
You're welcome.
Before we talk about Linfield, let's talk a little bit about your background. Where were you born and where did you grow up?
I was born in Salem, and I grew up across the United States. My dad was in the military, and we moved a lot. So I lived in South Dakota, Illinois, Washington, D.C., state of Washington, and ended up in Eugene from my 7th grade on. Went through Eugene High. It was just Eugene then, it wasn't South. And my graduating class was about 600 students. It was a 3-year high school of about 1,800. So Linfield was a real shock.
How did you end up at Linfield?
Well, Linfield had put out a lot of coaches, and I wanted to be a football coach. So I heard that they had a good program for coaches, and somebody recommended me to. And so they sent me a scholarship, and I didn't know where McMinnville was, so I had to look it up on the map. And another friend of mine, Don Timbrook, also got a small scholarship, and we went up to Linfield, and we found out where it was.
Tell me about your first impressions of the school and of the town.
I thought it was small, especially the school. And we had, I think every morning we had to go to chapel. And since I was I was first seat in chapel, which was kind of interesting. I can remember the library was about as big as this room, and I was really shocked at how small everything was. The equipment kind of left something to be desired. I can remember my shoes were 2 different brands, and so I wasn't overly impressed. We had a lot of students from small schools in Eastern Oregon that I had never heard of. And it was just a good experience for me to be in a small town. I felt welcome there. And right away, the first team center got hurt. So I started, and I was, at the time I was 17. And first game I played the full game. In those days, you had to play offense and defense. Defense, I was a linebacker, and the offense, of course, I played center. And right away, they told me to keep my left hand up over my face, and I didn't, broke my nose. And we had a line coach by the name of Al Wills, who was from St. Louis High School, Hawaii. And he said, I told you to keep your left hand, and I never forgot that. But we had some really outstanding football players, and I was lucky because I had an All-American guard on my left and an All-American guard on my right, Howie Morris and Vic Fox. So they pretty well could tell me what I should do and what I shouldn't do. And we won the championship, which was a shock to everybody. One of the things that I remember was a kid by the name of Howard Glenn. He played in front of me on defense, and he'd clean everything out, and I could jump on the runner. And he's just a great ball player. And he later broke his neck in pro ball and died. But I always remember Howard and what a tremendous ball player he was. But we had actually we had quite a few really good ball players.
Tell me about the experience of being a 17-year-old freshman playing football at that level.
Well, I learned about drinking beer, and we would go up to Lumpy's up outside of McMinnville, and Coach Durham had told us not to be caught drinking in Linfield or, of course, on campus. And so we'd get in the car and go up to what was it?
Lumpy's.
Yeah, Lumpy's.
In Dayton.
And Lumpy was a big guy who had played football at Linfield, and they didn't check the age very closely, so that was one of the things. And also pledging a fraternity. The two I can remember is Theta Chi and ATOs. Well, the Theta Chi's were probably a class above the ATOs, but all the athletes were ATOs, so I became an ATO. And it was a good experience. Fraternity taught me a lot.
Do you have any, besides having your nose broken, do you have any other memorable moments from playing at Linfield? Any games that stand out in your memory, or opponents that stand out in your memory?
Well, Lewis and Clark was the big power then, and I can remember I had a block that sprung our quarterback Parrish loose in that game, and we won it, and which was surprised us and everybody else. The other thing I remember was we went up to play Whitman, and Howard Glenn wasn't in the hotel with us, and I said, "Where's Howard?" And he says, "Oh, he's at a motel up the street because they don't allow blacks in the hotel." And I thought that was really quite strange because I'd been brought up in Eugene, which was fairly liberal, and it struck me that, there's still a lot of prejudice around, and especially since Howard, he was an extremely quiet individual, and I just didn't feel it was quite right that he wasn't there.
You talked a little about the equipment earlier.
The equipment.
The mismatched shoes. Tell me more about the equipment you had.
The equipment was a little left to be desired. Some of the helmets had face masks, some of them didn't. And I had this big plastic face mask, and I think we were playing in Idaho somewhere, and it was really cold, and I hit that thing and it shattered. And but it's the equipment was kind of hand down. It really improved after we started winning. Things got a lot better, and the reason that I left Linfield was, first of all, my sophomore year, I dislocated my shoulder playing Cal Poly, and they had a big fullback, and I was playing linebacker, and first play he made 5 yards, and I said, "Boy, I'm stopping this guy the next time he came through," and I tackled him, and when I went to get up, I couldn't find my right arm. And I just had my left arm, and you push yourself up, and my right arm wasn't there. And when I went over to the sideline and it dislocated, it cleared into the middle of my back. And so that ended my football career for Linfield. And my wife, I got married my junior year, and my wife had a good job at the bank. So I could go to Oregon cheaper than Linfield with a scholarship. So I went down to Oregon, and of course I thought I'd have no trouble making the Oregon football team. But I learned the difference between that type of ball and Linfield. But in some ways, Linfield was nice to play. First of all, they didn't have spring ball, which regardless of what they say, every athlete hates spring ball. There's no game. There's basically just trying to prove yourself every day. And the other thing is, Linfield at that time played 8 games. Oregon now plays 12, and so you got a lot more opportunity to get hurt. And the speed of the ball players is tremendous compared. Probably the biggest difference is that their ball players are all very, very quick, especially at that time. They had just gone to the Rose Bowl, and they had quite a few outstanding ball players.
Tell me about the style of play for Linfield. How would you describe Linfield's style of play at that time?
Simple. Run off tackle, sweeps, and a few trap plays. But like I said, I was 17-year-old and I could master the offense. At Oregon, it was much more complex. But not to say that Linfield didn't have good athletes. They did, but they didn't have consistently the quality of athletes that Oregon have. You didn't have the Wilcox and people like that.
You talked about it being a big surprise for everyone to win the championship in 1956. Do you have any recollection of, did anything change that year? Was there why the success?
I think Durham was a great writer, and he wrote newspaper articles about us, and you can look at that. And he encouraged us through newspapers, and you got a lot of publicity. We're a small town. There's nothing else going on in McMinnville, and so that kind of we were always in the news, in front of the news, and winning was a real surprise to us and very accepted in the community.
In the aftermath of the win, did it feel like you had set up for future success? Did anything change for the program?
Equipment got a lot better, and they got assistant coaches that were more qualified. Some of our assistants were people that coached other sports that had to help out with football, and the whole attitude of the school changed towards football. Before, it was kind of something you did in the fall, and afterwards it was something that people looked forward to. Crowds got bigger, the importance of ball games got bigger. Back then, they always had articles, like in the Oregonian and the Journal and so forth. Nowadays, it's all NBA and Oregon State. But then it was, you had articles about your smaller schools. And it just, Durham was capable of putting the spotlight on football and the players.
So you talked about Paul a little bit. Tell me do you remember your first impressions of Coach Durham?
He's a talker, and he was very articulate, and he had grown up in Portland, and therefore he knew the state and the community, and they were happy to get me because I was one of the first players they gotten out of Eugene. And after that, they got quite a few kids from Eugene. So that I was impressed with him. I wasn't as impressed with him as a football coach as a person, that he was really a fine person. Football, he copied other people a lot. And what they did, and we would emulate the same type of thing.
As you were thinking about being a coach yourself, was there anything you took away from him or from your Linfield experience toward the future?
Yeah, there was one thing. He was very insistent upon being a good person and being concerned about what the athletes were doing. And that really kind of touched me because he frowned upon drinking and smoking and all those things that a lot of the coaches didn't pay much attention to, but he did. And he's an outstanding speaker.
So, in what were you studying in school? Any memorable classes or
Life of Jesus. And I was brought up in the Missouri Synod Lutheran Church, and Life of Jesus was a little different from Baptist Linfield and but I can always remember Life of Jesus. I can remember I got my first outstanding grade in speech, so it made me realize that I could talk, and I thought that would help me in teaching. The other thing they did at Oregon, when you went out for football, you got 3 hours worth of PE. Linfield, you got nothing. And I always thought, gee, you're out there working your butt off and you should get credit for it. But it was different. Like I said, the library was very small. The professors were very open and accessible. Where at Oregon, sometimes it was pretty hard. You go into a biology class and you have 300 students, and you go into a history class and they're huge, and you have to make appointments to see somebody. And at Linfield, they were pretty accessible.
Any Linfield professors that you remember? Any particular favorites, or the opposite of that?
I can't remember their names. The guy in Life of Jesus, I remember I wasn't too thrilled with him, and I really didn't become a student until I went to Oregon, and I can't recall the names of the professors right now.
So let's talk about after you left Linfield. You went to Oregon. What was your major there? What was your degree in?
My degree was in history, social science.
And what did you do after graduation?
I got a job at Elmira, and I coached 2 years there. Then I coached at Dallas, Oregon. Then I coached at Roseburg. And then I became head coach at Bend, and we went to the semifinals in football, and I got a lot of recognition for that. And then I coached at Park Rose.
Always football?
Always. And wrestling. Coached wrestling because if you could wrestle, then you coached wrestling because they never could find coaches, but it was really something that I did in the winter, but wasn't my main aim in life. Yeah, I coached baseball, and I would pray for rain every day, and I couldn't hit the ball with a fungo bat, so I'd have one of the kids hit the ball for me, and hoped it rained so that we wouldn't have to play too many games. But
tell me about your as you obviously coached football for a number of years. Tell me about your kind of coaching philosophy as you developed it.
Keep it simple. At Bend, we were very successful, and we got to the semifinals, beat Jesuit, and try to home in on each individual and work on their strengths and weaknesses. In 1966, I was coach of the year. I was 26 years old. I thought it'd just be a matter of days before I'd become head coach at a major university. And then I moved over to Park Rose, and we were in the Metro League with Jesuit and Central Catholic and Beaverton, and found out that it was really tough to win. And the big thing that happened to me was my marriage class. Anyway, when I was at Bend, my first year there, I had 3 or 4 outstanding football players that got married. And I said, what's this getting married thing? And of course, it finally, light went on in my head that they had to get married. Well, you couldn't play if you were married. So it kind of wiped my team out. And I thought, I've got to do something about this. This is baloney. So I got this idea that I would pair the kids up in a mock marriage, take them through 10 years of marriage, and that would solve the problem. Anyway, I went to my vice principal, head of curriculum, and told him my idea, and he said, you're crazy, Alan. He says, they are not going to allow you to do that here. And I said, oh, okay. Before that, I'd been at Elmira, and I had some kids that could not read and write. And so I'd pair them up with a reader, and so they'd work together. So I'd done a little of this. So I decided I moved on to Park Rose. I still had this idea, and I went to the superintendent this time, and he said, yeah, you can go ahead and do it, but it's on you. If it goes wrong, it goes bad, you're to blame. And I said, well, great. And so I offered it as an elective course and had very few students sign up for it, and it didn't go real good. And the next term, I got a few more students, and it really started catching on. The kids liked the idea of working with somebody else, and we had a marriage ceremony. And so suddenly this little lady shows up the door of my classroom. She has a little bun on top of her head, and she was a writer for some magazine.
Star or something, really.
And anyway, she said, could she sit in the class? And I said, yeah, but I said, they're really busy, and it's not a typical classroom. They're working on various projects and so forth, so just don't bother them. So she got in the back of the room and is taking notes down there. And about a month later, I looked down into the grocery store, and one of these papers, National Enquirer,
Yes.
and it says Kids Shack Up in High School. And it told all the things that we were doing and so forth. And of course, the phone was ringing off the hook down to the superintendent's office. And I told him what had happened. He says, well, it's on you. So I got a lot of calls from What's My Line to Tell the Truth, Phil Donahue's show, 60 Minutes. We're on all these programs. And so we finally ended up publishing this with Channing Beat Company, which is in Massachusetts. And so I'd fly out there, take my wife with me, and sometimes we were at conferences in Washington, D.C., New Orleans, so forth. So I'd either be the speaker or be selling this through Beat Company.
So it survived the outcry after the Enquirer magazine.
Oh yeah, then the kids couldn't wait to get into that class.
So as you were out speaking and selling, did it spread? Were there a lot of other people who
4,000 high schools across the United States. And of course they published it, and the reason I went with them is because they
did it.
They gave me a good 12% of the total, where most of them will give you 12% of the profit. There's never any profit. And also Playboy magazine wanted to do something, but they never got around to it. But anyway, Yeah, it was
It was crazy.
it was more than I ever thought would happen with it.
About what year was this?
What year does that say?
This is a adopter's guide from 1977.
Okay.
Okay.
Do you have an idea of how long a period we're talking about here? How long from when you implemented it to when it? How long did you sell it for? How long was this, like a decade?
It was about 5 years.
5 years. Okay.
Yeah, it's
Well,
about
5 years for the sale with Channing Beat.
Yeah.
Your contract with them. But it was probably more like 10 years from
Yeah.
the start of it, because you were on those other shows before Channing Beat took over. So, yeah.
Anyway, it was
Crazy.
something I was expecting. After my great year at Bend, I was expecting it to just be a matter of time before Oregon would be calling me up. I never expected this to happen to do this. It was just it happened and took place, and
Incredible.
But you also spent 3 years with the state.
yeah, I
putting it
worked
in.
the state. We started getting tremendous amount of mail, and it was interrupting. I was department head, and it was interrupting the school, and they said,
No.
you've got to do something. And I said, well, what? And he says, well, there's federal grants for things like this. And so apply for a federal grant. So I got a federal grant for 3 years. I went all over the United States, around Oregon, and set this program up.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
So I see on this that you're listed as the Title IX director at this point, or I'm sorry, as Title IV director. Okay, never mind. Like Title IX, that seems really early.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm curious. Was it successful? Was the program successful? Did students get something from it?
They loved it, and we did a lot of testing on they had fewer divorces, they had fewer kids, they did better financially, and so it had a high rate. University of Oregon invited me down to get a doctorate, and I got accepted, but they wanted me on campus for 2 years, and I said, I've got 3 kids and a family to support. I can't be messing around getting a doctorate and whatever. And then so Oregon State called me up and said they wanted to talk to me, and they talked to me about getting a doctorate there. And then I said, what would it be in? And they said home economics. And I said, what am I going to do with a doctorate in home economics? I'm a football coach. We don't care about that. So
as after you kind of got through this stretch, were you still coaching football at the end of it?
I coached football until about 1973, and then we started buying apartment buildings, and so with the money we got from this, we bought property. And Miss Judy runs the apartment business.
Can you tell?
And
Not everything.
so I really didn't have time. And besides that, what happened to Park Rose was the freeway went through, and it cut the school's population down by a third. And so we weren't competitive, and I kept telling them, we can't compete with the Beavertons and Jesuits and Central, because we just don't have enough kids. And they said, oh, you can do it, Cliff. And I said, no, I'm not going to do it. And so they kind of went kaput.
So I know you do you follow Linfield football? Have you followed Linfield football much since you left?
Yeah, I follow it, and the various schools and so forth. And our grandsons all play for Clackamas. So, yeah.
Have you? At what point did you become aware of the streak and of your role as starting the streak?
Probably, I got assistant coaches from Linfield, and they'd remind me all the time about how great they were.
Did Bill
And
Plumo,
Gary Olson, and
did Bill Plumo go there?
no, he was from McMinnville. He went to Oregon State. And so I think probably
Gary Walls.
Gary Walls, yeah, he was another one of those assistants. Probably in the mid '60s, I started realizing they were winning consistently, and from then on, I followed them. And then they were on TV, on their championship games, and I followed them.
So, as you know, we're doing this project in part because this will be the 65th year of the streak, hopefully this fall. What does that mean to you as you look back and being part of something that started that 65 years ago?
We didn't know we were starting anything. We were just playing football and trying to get through school. But pride in Linfield, especially when you see a lot of these small schools, colleges folding because they can't afford it. And I'm proud to be from Linfield and proud that I played there and got my first education there. A lot of kids at that time, a lot of my friends from Eugene went to Oregon and flunked out. Oregon was tough, and academically it was very tough. Where Linfield, I wouldn't say wasn't as tough, but they were more compassionate, and they helped each other out.
As you kind of, what would you hope for the future for Linfield College and for the football team?
Keep winning, and I just hope that they survive and prosper.
You talked about sort of the character of Paul Durham. It's come up in some off-camera conversations, but I wonder if you'd be able to talk about sort of the team chapel. Was that a requirement the team went to chapel together?
No, not together, but we all had to go to chapel. And I can't remember if it was just freshman and sophomore, but I can remember since I was that I was a front row center. And so and it was early in the morning. And that's another thing I used to do. I used to eat with the girls because they always had food left over. And I was always hungry. And so I could get their extra food. And it was the dining hall was in the basement of the old building there. I don't know if it's still there or not. It is.
The building is. The dining hall is not.
Oh yeah, well, it was a unique situation. It was just coming from Eugene, which we had a new high school then, and it was a big school, and there was a lot of outstanding students. I mean, there were going to be doctors and professors and so. And going to Linfield was just a real shock. It was different, and it wasn't bad different, it was just different. And it was good for me, because I'm sure if I'd gone to Oregon, I'd had a lot of problems, and because a lot of my friends did. And they ended up coming to Linfield. But anyway, it was a good experience. And Paul Durham was always there. He was always willing to talk to you. His office and always working open. That's not true at a university like Oregon. The head football coach, you're not going to go talk to him unless you're a superstar or somebody he knows.
Cliff, did you tell them about, was it Howie Morris?
Yeah.
About going on trips with them?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah, because
I
that
told
was
them about
tough.
I'm curious, as a 17-year-old freshman playing center, what was your playing weight?
I think it's in there. I think it's 190, 195.
Compared to the center today.
That's
Yeah,
incredible.
today it's just, these guys are out of sight. I don't know what they weigh at Linfield. I know at Oregon they're 300, 310.
About
So forth.
265, 275.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mm.
Yeah.
they're good size. Yeah, we basically we were always hungry. the and you know the dorms had house mothers in them, so it was just a different situation. I can remember my car broke down and I took the engine out and put it in my room and work on it, and the house mother was not impressed at all with what I had done. But
Speaking of size, do you remember the Seattle Ramblers, the semi-pro team, as only a 17
Yes.
18-year-old who played?
we
people,
played
you know,
we
guys
played the Seattle Ramblers, and I can remember if the guards are covered and the center is free, you have to pull out and pick up the end. So I pulled out and picked up the end, and this guy was about 6'7", about 280, and he just picked me up like this and threw me back at the quarterback, and he said, "Nice try, little fella." They were pretty impressive. But like at Oregon, the guards have the coach, the center has a coach, the defensive backs have. We didn't have all that. We had about 2 or 3 coaches, and that was it. There was a line coach, offensive backfield coach, and Durham. So that was pretty well it.
So all the questions that we have for you today. Is there anything else that we didn't get to that we should have talked about? Any other Linfield or Linfield football related memories?
I can't really think of anything.
We've covered. This has been great. We've covered a lot. We talked about marriage class, which is a first for me, I got to tell you. So, thank you so much for joining us today, for sharing your time and experiences with us. And we'll go ahead and let you off the hook here.